All right, we're back on the SchmearCast. I mentioned this at the top. I just want to reiterate the next segment. We're going to be honoring Mr. David Lynch. I asked some choice readers and listeners of the SchmearCast, of the Schmear Hunter, to come onto the show and bring in their favorite, their most impactful, their most memorable David Lynch scene. He is such a unique filmmaker that speaks to everyone so deeply and so personally. And I thought that this activity, this exercise would be the best way to really demonstrate what he meant to people. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't share what he meant to me. You know, I think the first film I remember seeing of his was Mulholland Drive because of the Winky's diner scene, which was just kind of an urban legend of just how terrifying that moment is. And it does remain very scary. But my first real foray I can remember into his work really has to be Twin Peaks. It's me at college, sophomore year. Some recreational drugs might have been enhancing the experience. And it's just sitting down and journeying to Twin Peaks, this town where the rhythms and the pace and the way people act and the way people talk and the music, it all led to this incredibly intoxicating, mesmerizing experience where time would stop and God, I would just enter this world in such a vivid way. And there's so much within the world to grab onto, or try to at least. There's the central mystery of who killed Laura Palmer. But then more than that, there's all of the small fantasies and surrealist filigrees that just fill this world up and make it so inviting and scary and all of these things. And next, I think I watched Blue Velvet, which those two works, Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet, really speak to each other in such a way of showing the rot and corruption and evil that can lurk so close to the surface of suburban life and its quietude. And you know, that thin line that separates them, and that membrane that gets passed back and forth way too easily in David Lynch's films. I remember just being so striking and upsetting and alluring. And I think that's just how I'll always remember his work, the way that you want to be part of the world. And on the other hand, you want to be so far from it. Mulholland Drive probably is my favorite David Lynch film. I think it's a masterpiece. As someone who lived and worked in Hollywood for years, I think the film serves as such an amazing love letter as well as a poison pen letter. And you know, some of the best LA noirs do exactly that. You think of Sunset Boulevard, an extremely influential film for Lynch. I think that Mulholland Drive captures that dichotomy that exists within Los Angeles so well, maybe better than any film that's ever tried to portray and embody the city. Now I'm just going through the filmography. I'll stop us there. We'll get into my conversations with all of the way smarter and more exciting people that had much to say about Mr. David Lynch. But just to complete the task of favorite, most memorable Lynch scene, I will just recall Mulholland Drive. Betty, played by Naomi Watts, is a happy-go-lucky girl in from Deep River, Ontario. You think all she is just this aw shucks, gee whiz kind of gal. And then she steps into a producer's office for an audition, and the film becomes sensual and sexy and languid, and her performance is extremely charged with eroticism. And you're like, whoa, how did we get here? What am I watching? And it's this slippage from a fantasy into a reality. And I think that scene serves as the, no pun intended, the linchpin of the film as we head from a dreamy fantasy into a way too scary nightmare. To me, that moment is Lynch at his best. He's getting so much from his performers. He is playing with our minds and with our understanding of what's real and what's not real. And to me, it encapsulates what makes him so special. But enough from me. Let's hear what makes him special from others. We're going to go right into it. And first up, I'm talking to Lucas Murphy about his favorite David Lynch scene or moment.
All right, I am here with Lucas Murphy. He is a filmmaker, he is an editor, and he is a writer. And Lucas, you've been on the show before. David Lynch is a massive influence for you and your work. You love this man. I asked you to bring in a favorite David Lynch scene from, not necessarily a favorite movie, but just a favorite scene that really encapsulates what he's all about, what he's so good at. And I turn it over to you, Lucas. How are you feeling, and what'd you bring me today?
Yeah, well, I brought my favorite scene from my favorite movie of all time. So you're getting high hitters here.
Okay.
But, I think obviously I'm very sad and devastated, but I also have mostly been filled with the joy that we got David Lynch's work. And I think there's truly no artist who has affected me more, and I think the wave of content on the internet that's the same is just like, I think he really affected everyone who's an artistic person of our generation in a really deep way. And the scene that I wanted to bring in is the Club Silencio scene from Mulholland Drive. One time in college, we had to bring in a something to show the class to like help break the ice, and I just played this scene and was like, "This is everything you need to know about me."
And no one spoke to you for the rest of the semester.
Yeah, no one's friends with me anymore. So the context for the scene is it's near the end of the film, and they have been on this kind of wild goose chase to find what this key belongs to that they found.
Right.
And it brings them to this club in downtown LA, and they walk in and they sit down and they kind of watch this cabaret show by this kind of MC who keeps playing music and saying, "No hay banda," there is no band.
No hay banda. Yeah, there you go. That's more like it.
Yeah, exactly. You're the expert on that one. And he keeps playing. He says there is no trumpet, and yet you hear a trumpet.
Right.
And as he's playing this, Naomi Watts' character starts to shake and starts to like physically experience what is happening. And this continues for a couple minutes, and then he brings out this woman who sings a Spanish language version of "Crying" by Roy Orbison, which is a classic, beautiful song. And they play the whole song, and for me, what this scene represents is I think it really contains all of David Lynch's, why his work is so resonant, is he was the master of telling you it's not real, and yet you still feel it. And in that scene, when she starts singing, you kind of forget that he just said "No hay banda." You forget that the movie itself is telling you this isn't real. It's a movie. This is getting put in an ADR. Like, this isn't real, and yet you still feel it, just like Naomi Watts crying in the theater. Like, you cry. You cry when Laura Palmer dies. You cry when these things happen, even though what David Lynch's cinematography shows you is it's fake. It's surreal. It's not real. And I think, for me, that scene, and then the woman collapses at the end as the song continues, and it just resonates, this feeling of what is real, what is not.
Right.
And
to me, it's like the death of a dream, because it signals a big turning point in that film into a really dark direction.
Yeah.
And that's incredible stuff. So how do you feel when you see it? You've seen this scene many times now. Is it giving you new feelings each time?
Yeah, I mean, I just watched it right before this, and I think it's funny because I haven't seen the movie in a few years, and now watching the scene itself, to me, it feels like a thesis for David Lynch and what he was trying to do throughout all of his work, which is like this surrealism that reveals something deeper about ourselves, and that emotions don't really belong to the reality; they belong to the dream, And I think that scene, when I watch it now, it's like, that is the realest shit in the world, It's similar, and this is not the scene, but earlier in the movie when Naomi Watts does the audition, and she does it so incredibly well.
Right.
And you don't, up to that point, realize that she's a good actress. And it's like, it's all of his work, especially Twin Peaks, is like forcing you to forget how obviously he's making these things. He's showing you all of this is dream. And yet, isn't that life? Don't we walk around outside and, we have emotions? How do we really react to our emotions, I guess, is what the scene is about, I think. And that realizing our emotions aren't real. in the physical sense, but that the realist thing in like a metaphorical sense.
Very well said, Lucas. Thank you for coming on and sharing
Yeah,
your
of course.
favorite scene
Anything
today.
for my guy.
Love you, man.
Yeah, I love you too.
Stay strong out there.
Love to David Lynch up there.
Yep.
You know, he's with David Bowie in the weird red room, you know.
And all the other Martians.
All right, long time no see. I'm back with Karsten Runquist. And Karsten, I am posing the question to you to bring in a favorite David Lynch scene that really speaks to you. You are a massive David Lynch fan. You have 2 incredible videos, David Lynch Ranked and Twin Peaks Deserves the Hype, that both are in the hundreds of thousands of views because you struck a chord. People love David Lynch and you love him too. And in your filmmaking style, I feel like you try to evoke him too. So what does he mean to you and what scene did you bring in today?
No, that's very kind of you to be. I didn't think you were going to say that, but thank you. Yeah, he's a huge inspiration. Just changed the way I look at art in general. And taught me how to I don't know, the limitless. What?
Limitlessness.
Yeah. Wait. What am I trying to say? The lack of limitations with filmmaking, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I chose a smaller scene that I don't think people talk about nearly enough from Mulholland Drive, when Justin Theroux's character encounters this cowboy character. It's a really bizarre scene with a really fun backstory. He goes to this cowboy at night. This ranch lights up as he shows up, and the cowboy has this like he confronts him in a way that's like, he's like, "Are you actually listening to what I'm saying?" And Justin Theroux has this super like Hollywood smug attitude about him that feels really personal for Lynch, knowing his experience in the industry. And it almost reads like David Lynch talking to the industry in a weird way. I know that's maybe a bit of a stretch, but that's kind of how I read it. And this actor who plays the cowboy is just a personal friend of David's, who is not a professional actor and couldn't remember his lines, couldn't perform on the day. And so they had to like go as far to like, Justin Theroux had to hold the lines up to his face, and the actor had to like, basically read the lines just right there. And you get this really cold, unsettling performance, like this kind of like robotic performance out of him.
Yeah.
That ends up, of course, working perfectly for the scene. Yeah. And it's just a really great example of his genius as a director. It's like such a bold choice that could fail miserably, but of course ends up, it's like he picked this guy for a reason. He knew it would work. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's just and it's also like I think he's I admire him so much for how uncompromising he is. He sticks to his vision so strongly, but it's also moments like this where he can adapt on a dime and come up with this brilliant idea on set and work with what he's given and still get what he needs out of it. And just one of his most iconic scenes.
It's a great call. I just rewatched Mulholland Drive, and this scene struck me. And you saying he's a non-professional actor, like it makes sense because he's imbuing the moment with like this intense seriousness that feels like an actor like would overact that scene or something.
Yes.
The guy is like giving a real warning that needs to be heeded, and you've never seen him before, and so you're like, okay, I gotta listen to this guy.
Right.
And it really doesn't matter to the plot, which is also
yeah. It has also got this perfect kind of, it reminds me a lot of like some of the best parts of Twin Peaks, where there is some like weird rules to his interact. Like he's like, if you see me one more time,
right,
you got it right, or in 2 more times you did something bad.
With that deadpan delivery,
yeah, and then he just drifts off into into the blackness, and then you without. I don't want to spoil, but you do see him again very subtly,
right?
And it's like so good. It's just such a perfect use of this character, and had to bring up this scene. Yeah,
no, I love it. The Ghost Cowboys of Beechwood Canyon. Karsten, thank you very much, and I appreciate you bringing in this scene and talking it through.
Thanks for having me.
All right. I am here with Isaac Feldberg. Isaac's a critic at RogerEbert.com and is writing elsewhere. And Isaac, I saw you post on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days, that David Lynch, upon his passing, is the most important filmmaker of his era without question, and that we're all so lucky to have lived in his lifetime. So I wanted to reach out to you and see how you're feeling, and if you have a specific scene when it comes to David Lynch that encapsulates what makes him so special that really speaks to you.
Thank you for having me on to talk about David Lynch, especially. I would say, of course, the outpouring of grief and the outpouring of support for him and recognition of the work that he did. It's so clear that he touched so many people in so many distinct and personal ways. And when I call him, which I stand by, the most important filmmaker of his era, maybe one of the most important artists of his era, what I'm referring to is that way of sort of reaching into the unknown and kind of tapping into the subliminal and finding a way to convey that and put it on screen that was so direct and tangible and emotional and impactful. People really felt that they could be mesmerized by his work, that they could lose themselves in it. He opened up these portals to other worlds that were reflections, mirror images of the worlds that we all live in and that we all see and maybe are suspicious of beneath the surface as well. And I think that he really, so much of his work was about reaching beneath surfaces and finding all of these things that existed there. And so that was something that, I was really struck by in the just cross section of people in culture, of critics, of actors, of filmmakers who idolized him because he saw so much in and below images and was able to find that depth, that really, infinite depth in the films that he made. I think, if I'm thinking of scenes when it comes to David Lynch, there are so many that you could name. I think he really was someone who crafted extraordinary scenes, extraordinary images. And I think so much of images, even more than I think of entire films or entire series.
Right.
When I think of his art, I think about the sensations that certain images sort of leave you with.
Right.
I would. I could say so many. I could talk about the car crash in Wild at Heart with Sherilyn Fenn. That moment of realizing how injured she is and knowing that she's sort of beautifully unaware of the fact that she has been injured in this crash. Like, that is an image that really sticks with me. Patrick Fischler's reaction in Mulholland Drive, coming face to face with this nightmare that he has had behind the diner. But I think that, the scene that, most comes to mind for me right now is the scene with Robert Blake in Lost Highway at the party. This moment where this guy, really terrifying, sort of, pale kabuki masked ass guy walks up to him at this party and is just so out of place and so immediately unsettling, and so much about the way that Lynch frames that moment and holds his camera in there is about this destabilization of this house party scene that this person represents, the mystery man. And I think so much about the expression on his face, this just complete contempt and knowledge, this terrible knowledge of something completely unfathomable and unreal that this mystery man represents. And he hands Fred the phone and tells him that he's been, both at Bill Pullman's house and he's there in person. And just, the way that he is able to orchestrate that so that Fred calls the phone number and the guy's voice picks up and he says, "I told you I was here." And it's just this moment where he's confronted with the impossible and with the gloating supremacy of the impossible, the way that he just is so confident that this is real, and Bill Pullman is so foolish to have not considered that this was the way it was going to be. And so that scene to me really epitomizes the weirdness, the strangeness of Lynch, and the
Yeah.
way he is able to also find so many extraordinary faces and collaborators,
Mm-hmm.
bring those kinds of uncanny moments to life.
Right.
And so I think Lost Highway is filled with those moments, but that's one that really stands out to me.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's a very scary and haunting. And then you see Lynch publicly, and he's all smiles and all shucks and happy. And you think, how did this guy conjure up this darkness? And that's part of the mystery as well, you know?
Yeah.
Isaac, thank you so much for your reflections and for your scene. I appreciate it. And might go rewatch Lost Highway right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel.
All right, I am here with Jesse Aaronson. He's been a correspondent of a sort and a friend here on the SchmearCast in the past. And Jesse, David Lynch is a massive influence for you, one of your favorite filmmakers. So it's only natural that I had you on to talk about your favorite scene from a David Lynch film. Doesn't have to be your favorite film, but a scene that really sticks with you because of how personal his filmmaking is to so many people. So what'd you bring in today?
Yeah, well, first of all, I can't believe we lost David Lynch, and I can't believe we never got one of those final Lynch projects. It's gonna be one of those things that I'll be sad about forever. But we always have his legacy, of course, and his movies are such puzzle boxes and are so inscrutable at times that, like, you can watch these movies 1,000 times, or his series, whatever. You can watch anything he's made 1,000 times and find something new. In the days since David Lynch has passed, I've been thinking about my most memorable experiences with him. And the first thing that came to mind was seeing the 4K restoration of Inland Empire, his 2006 psychological horror, thriller, satire, whatever you want to call it, at IFC in New York, with my friend Nabil. And I would never, ever say that Inland Empire is my favorite David Lynch movie. I'm not even sure it's a movie that I like, but it is a movie that I'm obsessed with and has lived in my brain since seeing it. And there's a scene very early on that I would say describing the plot of Inland Empire is a fool's errand, but roughly, it's about this actress played by Laura Dern who auditions for a film early on, and then everything unravels from there. And as David Lynch has described, he's actually been very cagey about what Inland Empire means.
Always has.
Exactly. But he says very plainly, and I remember they played this before this restoration at IFC, this is a movie about a woman in trouble. And that is all you need to know about the movie to unlock it, I guess. And very early on, Laura Dern is in her mansion, and her Eastern European neighbor, who she's never met, comes over to her house and starts talking to her and telling her a fable of a little boy and a little girl. And Laura Dern just has no idea what the fuck this woman is talking about. And at one point, she says, and I wrote this down, so I'm reading here. This is direct quote.
Please.
She says, "This is her neighbor, not Laura Dern." And I won't do the Polish accent that she has.
Spare us that. Thank you.
She says, "Me, I can't seem to remember if it's today, 2 days from now, or yesterday. I suppose if it was 9:45, I'd think it was after midnight." And then there's this like deathly chime, like a midnight death knell. For instance, if today was tomorrow, you wouldn't even remember that you hold on an unpaid bill. Actions do have consequences, and yet there is magic. If it was tomorrow, you would be sitting over there. Do you see? And David Lynch, meanwhile, this whole movie is shot digitally in like really low quality, mid-aughts technology. Mm-hmm. And he has this he's holding on Laura Dern's face in a way. First of all, the medium of cinema was made for David Lynch to hold on Laura Dern's face in the way he does in this movie. But it's just so haunting and confounding and inscrutable. And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, this is a 3-hour movie that is like an endurance test.
Right.
This is like running an Iron Man of psychological horror. It is so uncomfortable. It's so ugly. It's so sharp. It's so disturbing at times. There are literal jump scares. And yet, I'm like, why do I want to watch this movie again? Why do I want to revisit this movie? What is it? I understood none of it. None of the movie made sense to me when I saw it. And to that end, the top review on Letterboxd is just a question mark of this movie. It's like a 5-star review with a heart, and it's just question mark. And I'm like, that's David Lynch's legacy. He makes these things that are that's part of his legacy, I should say. He makes these inscrutable, difficult things that make us want to come back for more. And he, dives deep into the psychosis of America, Hollywood, actors, entertainment, tragedy, grief, trauma, all these things, and somehow stands as one of the greatest artists ever to live.
Well, Jesse, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I don't know about a ringing endorsement of Inland Empire, but that's the thing, these things stick with you no matter how awful they make you feel sometimes.
Start with something else. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I'm curious about this.
Go
David
back
Lynch
to listen
fella.
to us talk about Elephant Man on the Criterion Challenge.
Yeah, true.
last
Elephant
year.
Man, even like Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, those are easier entry points. Inland Empire is painful.
Double Black Diamond skiing.
But it's worth a watch if you're interested in what a nightmare feels like on screen.
All right, Jesse, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm here with Alex Coco. Alex, you were on when we discussed the movie you produced, Anora, a few months ago. Incredible film. Welcome back.
Thank you.
I saw you posting a lot about your love of David Lynch upon his passing, and I knew I had to have you on to share your favorite David Lynch moment. So let the listeners know what you brought in, and welcome back.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to be back. And it's so terrible that David Lynch passed away. It kind of rocked me when it happened. Like, there's not a lot of filmmakers or just people in general that I don't know personally that, hearing about their passing would kind of make you totally stop in your tracks. But he's somebody that really it jolted me, when I saw the news. But I was also so happy with the outpouring of
totally,
of just tributes to him. It was, literally my social media was just like lit up with just David Lynch content, which I loved. But yeah, so I'm bringing in the scene from Mulholland Drive, when the guy feels like he's in a dream, and he sets up recreates the dream in the diner, and then eventually they go out back and they see the homeless person behind the dumpster there or whatever. But that's in that moment is probably one of the scariest. That's scared the shit out of me when I first saw the movie.
Well, I wonder, it's like you describe it, and if someone could do that scene so poorly and it could look so silly, and instead what David Lynch does is so intense, what do you think makes that scene so special in his hands?
Well, I think like the gentleman, who I forget his name, he's such a great actor, who plays the guy whose dream it is.
Right.
He is just like the way he's just so nervous, and he's like sweating, and the camera is doing like this amazing thing where it's like on the reverse shot, it's like floating a little bit. Like the camera is moving and looking like it's floating in midair, which I've actually, in a short film in film school, I used that same tactic to try to give it that same feel. I feel like it gives it such a dreamlike, scary quality, and because he's so deeply terrified,
right?
You're so deeply terrified, and you're totally in the head of his friend, who he's telling this story to, and you just don't know what's going to happen. It feels like this weird, like waking, between dream and like waking quality,
right? It's
which
so
is like
brightly lit. You think of a scary moment, it's dark, but this is a diner. Diners are supposed to be a place of comfort and safety, and not here.
Yeah, and that like that state of mind, where I think we've all like sort of like woken up from a dream, like and from like usually sometimes a terrifying dream, but you're you're not fully awake yet, and you're still kind of like in that dream space. You're kind of in this in between space, and it is like a terrifying uh, place to be, and he captures it in a movie. Like he's able to give you that feeling of that experience in filmmaking. I think, which is obviously he's the king of dreams, but in dream filmmaking, but yeah, that is so masterfully done. And then the reveal at the end, and the sound when the homeless person pops their head out. It's like this sort of amazing sound design that.
And then it cuts
Yeah.
out, and
Yeah.
you don't hear his
Yeah, he
reaction,
faints.
but it's just like full
Yeah,
horror.
yeah.
He's
All the
screaming,
sound
no
goes.
sound. Yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
unforgettable.
Yeah, that scene is totally unforgettable, and probably one of the most terrifying scenes.
Just glad Winky's Diner doesn't exist,
Yeah, I know.
But
I know.
those are a dime a dozen in LA, so watch your corners.
Yeah.
Alex, thank you very much. Great scene and great talking to you. Appreciate it.
Great talking to you.
I'm here with Marta Djordjevic, aka Marta McFly. She's a film journalist. She makes incredible reels over on her Instagram, and I'm sure you can find her in many more places soon. Marta, I had the impression that you would be affected by David Lynch's passing, as you're such a film buff, especially a connoisseur of his work. How are you feeling? Welcome. And what scene did you bring in today to discuss?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on here. It's really, I mean, I wish it was under better circumstances, but it's very still happy to be here. Yeah, it really did hit me deeply. I think I was telling you off mic. I've never grieved like this for a filmmaker death, as I'm sure is the same for so many of us. Yeah, I've been a diehard Lynch fan for many, many years, and it was really hard for me to narrow down a pick for this discussion, because I love all of his movies and his projects as well, obviously Twin Peaks. So I decided to go with the film prequel to Twin Peaks itself, which is Fire Walk with Me. And the scene I picked in particular is the ending, so the epilogue itself and the final few moments there.
So, what about that scene spoke to you so deeply?
I guess to
And
backtrack.
set the scene up for us a little bit,
For
literally.
sure. Let's backtrack first, because I guess there is some history
Let's.
to why this means so much to me. Like I said, yeah, it makes the most sense for me to pick this movie because Twin Peaks as a show is what started my journey through his work. I
Same.
was and still am so obsessed with it. I've seen it now too many times to count, and it was a show that I watched before I even got so deeply into film. I was really young. I always say I was too young because Bob was like the first ever pop culture character to give me nightmares for
Yeah.
many, many years. But yeah, it was my parents that got me into it. And I remember I watched
Cool parents.
Thank you. The first two seasons, obviously. And then they owned The Secret Diary of Laura Palmer, which was
Right.
written by Lynch's daughter. Have you read that?
I just learned that it even existed recently, but
Oh boy.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. So I snuck away and read that. Again, way too young. It's a book that had a lasting effect on me that lasted years. I don't say that lightly. And then I watched Fire Walk with Me, and that was just something. I was overflowing with emotion and sadness, which I guess brings me now to the epilogue. And it's hard to talk about the epilogue without spoiling too much.
It's okay.
But
we know Laura Palmer has died.
That's true. So
First
she
moment
has,
of Twin Peaks.
yes, exactly. Yeah. So if I'm spoiling that, then I mean,
You're all good.
yeah, thank you. So in the epilogue, so I guess I should say Fire Walk with Me serves as a prequel, but then you have that epilogue, which is after her death. You see Laura and Agent Cooper, and they're in the red room, and Cooper's kind of comforting her. You hear this beautiful, haunting, somber music playing, and then suddenly there's an angel floating above her. And Laura starts crying these tears of joy. And it's very simple. That's literally all I picked. And I know that the scene is open to interpretation because the movie's seen as a prequel. But then you get that ending, which I think could be described as the true ending of the series. I would like to think that it is. It gives me comfort to think so, a sense of solace. And I think it's because it's the happiest we've ever seen Laura. And I say happiest with quotation marks because it's the happiest ending that Laura could have gotten, like an out, if you will, from all of this suffering and a final release into the White Lodge. And I cry whenever I watch it to this day. It's super cathartic. And as I mentioned, this was a journey for me from the show to the book to the film. And then we later got the third season, right, with the return. And just being exposed to all this suffering and to feel like Laura's soul could rest finally, that stuck with me for so many years. And Lynch was, he was able to capture throughout all of his work this quiet and gentle devastation that almost kind of reminds me to Wild at Heart, the scene with Sherilyn Fenn in the car crash. It's something that's so horrific, yet he manages to make it tender.
Right.
And I think that's so beautiful about his work. And I think that this epilogue in Fire Walk with Me is a great example of that.
It's an amazing pick. And I just have one follow-up question, which is, I think much is made about Lynch's female characters, and especially Laura Palmer. She's the dead girl trope. And I think that what you're describing in that scene is a bit of reclamation for Laura Palmer. Is that how you read that as well? What do you say to a critic that, thinks Lynch just occupies himself with the dead girl trope?
Yeah, I mean, his movies are so open to interpretation, as we know. I mean, I don't even need to say that, but yeah, I think if you reformat and restructure Twin Peaks as a whole and put that epilogue as the ending, it is what you're saying. It is a reclamation of Laura herself. Yeah, so I definitely agree with you.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Marta, thank you so much for coming on. That's a great scene. That's a very harrowing movie that I'm not running to rewatch because it just hollows me out and devastates me, but I do want to revisit it because I want to get to that ending like you're talking about. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.